Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Welcome to the next episode of Yogananda podcast. We are still in chapter 15, the cauliflower robbery. We're at part 3 with no Lauren today, but we have a special guest today. We have Shiraz on the call today. Hi, Shiraz. How are you doing?
Hi, doing very well, thank you.
Amazing. See, Chris is in love. I like that.
Thank you for the reception, and thank you for inviting me to this.
Chris is sending the love vibes. That's great.
I manifested that by the power of my radiating.
Yeah.
Yeah, does this work if you do a heart shape? No. Oh yeah, there you go. Yes. Cool.
No.
Lovely. Thank you.
No. Well, this is all us expressing our welcome to Shiraz. And the first question we have asked most of our guests on the podcast before is their story, how you got to know about Yogananda, Guruji, and tell us your story.
Yeah, so my dad actually received the autobiography of Yogi from my grandmother when he was a young man. And then when I was in my late teens, I got my first version of the autobiography. And it was a wonderful moment in my life. And I found it, when I read it, to be a hugely inspirational and uplifting book.
Nice. Yeah, it is uplifting. It is great. And it's, I always liked about the autobiography of a yogi that it's like, so it contains a lot of deep spiritual truth, but it's also very easy to read. It's like with a young person who finds out about spirituality himself over the course of his life.
Shiraz, was your dad a free band, or did he join SRF? And your grandmother?
So yes, yeah, he joined SRF, and he's taken the lessons, most of the lessons. So yeah, and he's been quite active over the years. But yeah, so it's been good. It's been good to kind of share some of that wisdom with my dad.
It's like the best family environment, isn't it? Where we can share on the spiritual journey together, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty awesome.
And now you go to,
Yeah, and one of the other things I find is the autobiography is just so relatable and understandable, and it just encompasses some of the great spiritual truths expounded by a real master in layman terms that, you know, the average person can really understand. So that's one of the things I really love about the book.
Yeah, it covers the spectrum from like every type of intellect, doesn't it? Whatever your level of interest may be, because if your level of interest is like super keen, like us on the podcast, like we would probably we would go through the footnotes and check all the references inside the footnotes, which means that a single chapter can take quite a long while to read.
Yeah, we did Shiraz, we covered the documentary as well on it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, separate podcast to what that is, but I'm curious, you know, what did you think of that? When did you watch it? And
Awake, the life of Yogananda.
Yeah, Awake. I thought it was great, actually. It's lovely just to see it being broken down and to get, you know, other people's thoughts and comments on their experiences and reactions to Awake. So yeah, it's lovely to get different insights.
Awesome. Pleased to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And by the way, you came very prepared. You're more than welcome every week to come. To see how prepared you were for the episode.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And now you go to the same center where we all went for a long time. At least Chris and I used to, Priyank still does. So to the London
Yeah.
Center.
Yeah.
One of my favorite SRF centers in the world.
Mhm.
Very good place. Do you use the autobiography day to day in your spiritual life for wisdom?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I've just started rereading the autobiography about I'd say 2 weeks ago. And I've lost count of how many times I've read it by now, but it's just with every additional reading, it helps me to just learn a little bit more about the spiritual path, and I find greater attunement with God and gurus. And I find it really helps to kindle the fire in my heart for self-realization and to deepen my yearning for God realization as well. It's just a beautiful, beautiful book, and really, it's I found it quite life transforming.
Well said.
Amazing. Well said. Yeah, life transforming. A good way to put it. Great. So we are at in chapter 15 right now, part 3. Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened in the last chapter?
Sure.
Not last episode. Last episode, I mean. Yeah. Yeah.
Chapter part 2. So part 2, we looked at how Paramhansa Yogananda described his guru as Sri Yukteswar as a perfect human radio. And we delved into the analogy by discussing how man himself is constantly emitting rays and what this means for things like the nature of our thoughts. So we had a couple nice readings on positive thinking, and later on we looked at how Sri Yukteswar was able to operate himself as a broadcasting station by using the power of his will. So then we had another few nice readings on what Paramahansa Yogananda said about willpower, how to develop it. So that's it in a nutshell. But it was dominated really by a large footnote that looked at the analogy and the radio and what that really means scientifically. Just as Priyank said, for all the nerds, all the geeks out there like us, it was really good to go into the detail on exactly what this analogy meant.
Yeah, because one of the things Guruji does is he tries to draw parallels between his spiritual teachings and the latest of science and technology that is out there, even in his time when he did it, and those parallels are still relevant today. And now in part 3, he continues. He talks about intuition, and intuition is another one of those things that just comes to you, and I don't know if it's radio, but there is a way that intuition comes to you, not from the senses, but it comes to you from a different place. And we have a special receiver built into our makeup that allows us to read that. Guruji says, however, it happens in instants when his mind is calm. So if our mind is all over the place, our intuition might not be that great.
So that would then you'd infer that then the goal is to retain calmness and equipoise throughout your waking and perhaps sleeping consciousness. You've got to try and make it a permanent feature of your life if you're going to be guided by soul intuition. So it sounds obvious, doesn't it? But it's very well expressed here.
Does anybody else ever get the hunch that you're giving challenges over and over again, where you might have lost your calm, and then it's like, okay, well, have another go at it, and then if you don't keep your calm again, and then okay, you get an attempt, and it's maybe this cycling of, okay, I get it, I need to remain poised and calm in all these circumstances, but I find there's some that are reoccurring, and maybe this is why.
100%. And it's not always obvious what the lesson is. I find that frustrating. I feel like sometimes the same thing happens to me multiple times, and I thought I knew what I did wrong, but I was wrong. It was something else. and then I get frustrated, and I oftentimes when I can't think of what was going on, I just try to, in meditation, just pray and ask Guruji for guidance, because that, I feel like that's always my last resort, is prayer. That's like when I'm like in a good mood and when I feel like I know exactly what I'm doing, then I feel confident. And then when things happen where I feel like I'm in this repetitive cycle, then I feel prayer is often the way to get out.
Guruji is waiting for you to make it your first resort, though, Mike, not your last resort.
Yeah, it's all my resort. At the end of the day, it's really all I got. Right?
I think, but Master also talks a lot about the importance of trying to, during meditation, deep meditation, trying to develop that peace and calmness within, and then carry that forwards during the rest of your day as well. So easier said than done, but that's I think one of my ideals and aims, just to hold on to that peace that we feel in meditation, and to have that inner sanctuary which no one can invade and take that peace away from you.
And that's why, really good point there, Shiraz. That's why Guruji says never miss your appointment, start of the day and before you go to sleep with God through meditation, because it's just, as to retain the practice of retaining your calm, or develop your practice of retaining your calm through your waking life. And I joked about the sleeping life, but people do have bad sleeps, don't they? And that's probably because of the lack of calmness. And somewhere else I read in Guruji's writings, I think it was God Talks with Arjuna, it said, always surround yourself with Om. So it gave us a technique like before you sleep, and it, like described it, or did Brother Chidananda also describe it as well, just like before going to sleep, like chant Om and like feel the vibration coming out of your hands, and like put it around you, like surround your whole self with Om, and then obviously calmness should be one of the benefits. Shiraz, you remember where you read that, or where?
No, I just had it reminds me of something that I experienced, which was some years ago now. But I was having a nightmare, and it was a very unpleasant, experience. And then I actually consciously tried to think and feel Om, and I immediately woke up, and I came out of that nightmare. So it's just wonderful to see these kind of spiritual truths put into practice and appreciate their significance. Very
good. Well, that's a good lesson for us if we want to come out of a dream or make a dream less frantic if it is that way. But I really like Chris's point about do you find that God tests you with your calmness to see if you can retain your calm through the day, etc. Because when he said it, I was shaking my head. And I was like, no, I don't really get such frequent tests. But then I realized they've become less frequent because I must have been getting more calm, because before I started on the spiritual path, my mind was all over the place and there was no calm. So the test would be frequent. But as you go through your practice and you do your practices every day and you stick with Guruji and the path, then you'll find that you're obviously manifest some of these teachings, and then the need to be tested is because you already passed some of the tests. So the need to be tested frequently is probably diminished.
Yeah, the tests change, and then they come back when you least expect them.
Yeah. You think you got it? Nah, you don't.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think whenever we feel too safe, then life is just building something up for us, a new thing. So enjoy while it lasts. We have about the subject of Guruji says here, everyone has had the experience of an inexplicably correct hunch. And I'm sure we all had that before. And those are great moments, that a moment of clarity, right? Suddenly you see exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I tend to get them when I'm very close to the person that I'm with in terms of like knowing what they're thinking or you're going to say actually the same thing. And I think, Mike, you mentioned something similar before the podcast about this concept. But yeah, during this podcast, it often happens actually with both yourself, Mike, and Chris, when we kind of know what's in between the words of what we're saying, what each of us are saying. And it's quite nice to be in tune in this way, and you get these hunches, isn't it?
I think one common one that we may all be able to relate to is when a loved one is about to phone us.
Mm-hmm.
Give them off, and bang, there they are. That we pick up on the radio waves, or we have this sense of intuition that we should call somebody. They said, "Oh, they were thinking of us," and vice versa in these moments. But certainly, I agree, Frank. I think it's amplified. This ability to perceive is amplified through connections with the loved ones.
So to be really advanced, then it would be to have it with anyone, not just like people that you developed a good connection with, a strong connection with.
Yeah, I just booked a flight to somewhere where I know a friend of mine lives nearby. I was wondering, I don't have that much time on that trip, but I was wondering if I should go see them or not. And boom, the next day, he texted me for a completely different reason. I was like, okay, that's the answer.
You got to go now.
That's the answer. So yeah, those kind of things happen 100%. And we have oh yeah, Chris.
Okay, I was thinking, should I share the story or not? I think I may have shared it before, but I want to quickly share it. But this is how I met my wife. Through where I had this sort of voice in the back of the mind, so saying I should travel and take a trip, and on that trip I ended up meeting my wife, but inexplicable at the time. But one of these instances where I was quite calm and doing my practice and in a very good place, and I was able to pick up on that guiding voice very happily. So fast forward 7 years, we were married. So
in my very active imagination, Chris, I can imagine like you're just doing something unrelated, and then you just wake up, you get up, go towards a train station for no reason whatsoever, pick a random station, a random train, and then get on the train. This is my imagination playing tricks on me. I'm sure it wasn't in that way.
Yeah. I mean, it was connected through friends, visiting friends, and there was a weather warning, and we cancelled the event, and I ended up going to the event, and a friend of mine said he thought something great was going to happen. So he even picked up on the intuition as well.
Wow, strong. The stars were aligning, very strong. Jupiter's force was strong that day.
Yeah, all the planets were aligned.
Yeah. Impressive, Chris. Very impressive. So there are moments where it's a hunch, and do you guys feel it's a hunch because later it was proven that it was right? Because I sometimes feel like pretty sure it's like that, and then it's not like that, and then it wasn't a hunch. Then it was just something, just a random thought that I picked up. So Brother Satyananda talks about this often in his talks, and he says he trusts himself only when his mind is calm to make any decision, right? And so that's kind of a good way to. Guruji said whenever we make big decisions, we should sit down and try to go deep in meditation and try to find some kind of confirmation that what we're going to do is in accordance with divine will, or at least the right thing to do. So that makes sense like that. There is a section in the book, The Journey to Self-Realization, which has a chapter that is called Intuition, the all-knowing power of the soul. And we got a short excerpt from there. Priyank, you want to read this?
Sure. You have an inkling of the nature of intuition through those unexplained feelings called hunches. A hunch is undeveloped intuition, something you know without the medium of the senses or inference. Some truth that comes of itself. You may be sitting quietly and for no reason think of someone you haven't seen or had contact with for a long time, and then suddenly he arrives, or you hear from him. Now, how did you know? It was through a momentary flash of intuition. That kind of spontaneous intuition all of you have had at some time.
That's right. Yeah. And that's what we want for our whole life, right? Not just a flash. We want everything we do to be guided by intuition. And that's why regular meditation, going deep, is so important. Another thing that Guruji mentions here, that intuition works to just find the right thing to do. But before that, Chris?
I was just going to jokingly say, if you tend to be a little bit too heavy on the old gas pedal over there in the United States, or the accelerator pedal, you can pick up on where the police are and things like this.
My intuition told me there's no speed cam here.
This point.
That's right. But Guruji says you can also transfer your thoughts to another person actively. So not just receive, but you can also send. Maybe that's the more advanced version of it, or it really depends on who's on the receiving end, I would say. And when we continue in the text, Guruji talks about technology again. He talks about radio and television that have brought us this instantaneous sound inside of remote persons. And I think he mentions this here because this was new back then. This was kind of something that people found, something that is...
Sorry, but did we miss a card? The all sorts.
Oh, did we miss a card? Oh,
yes.
Oh, we missed the card. Oh, although that's right. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. Yeah.
You're too keen. You love that other card.
I should go back. Okay. No, we're actually two paragraphs above that, where the human mind, freed from the disturbances of static and restlessness, is empowered to perform all functions of complicated radio mechanisms, sending as well as receiving thoughts and tuning out undesirable ones. So we have this perfect radio built into our makeup. And then there is one thing that is very important onto how well our radio works. And Guruji says that is our willpower. So if we have strong willpower, we also are able to send those messages out and also receive those messages from other people. Yeah.
So then willpower would then be like how effective your transmission to Guruji is. And we have like affirmations, and we have prayers, and we speak to Guruji in the language of our hearts. But that was the effectiveness of that is proportional to how much will we have. So for example, the common one, which I discussed last episode as well, which was Guruji, receive my love, receive my love, receive my love, is like a transmission that you want to just keep playing until you feel the response. You increase and how do you increase your willpower? You increase your devotion and your concentration as well in that transmission. And also you can then improve your receiving power as well by saying reveal thyself, and then hopefully then you'll receive that tangible response that we're all after. But it's interesting because you'd think that in electronics, power, Guruji here is kind of saying like the amount of power that a transmitter has is equal to how much in our circumstance, how much willpower we use to transmit. But also in electronics, receivers have power as well. So the strength of the receiver is also proportional to how much power you put in the receiver. So similarly, we have to focus our efforts on receiving as well. through willpower.
The engineer speaking. That's good. There's people would then maybe ask, how can I increase my willpower? And that there are those two methods that Priyank just described. Two things that I also thought of is that there is the famous technique, of course, the energization technique of willpower and concentration. So I asked multiple monks that question, and they gave me that answer often, that the energization exercises actually help to develop willpower. And then Guruji also mentions in that, I think he mentions that in some of his writings, where he says that to try to do something every day where you thought you couldn't do it. Make a goal that is realistic, but you didn't think you were able to do it, and then achieve it. And this will increase your willpower. And that is very beneficial, like Priyank said, because then we don't need to develop willpower to transmit our thoughts to other people, but mostly our love to God, right? And receive his love. That's what the real goal of the exercises.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the thing that you said, which was achievable. And I think that's often the place where people don't even get to start, and myself included in the past, where you have to be humble enough to know where you're at and be able to know that, okay, maybe I'll start by doing whatever, take an exercise once a week, 3 times a week, build it up to once a day, and then twice a day. You do something as low a bar as you need to set, you set it, and then you start building up. I think it's just an important point. We talked about many times before about meditation. When people ask, how do you get into meditation? Similar, just build willpower. You start small.
Yeah, that's great. And just from my recollection, am I right in saying that the heart is also a receiving station, and you can receive, I'm not sure if it's thoughts, but maybe feelings, which is slightly separate here. But I seem to recall hearing some how to live talks by some of the monastics and in some of Guruji's writings, that the heart also receives information.
I think his brother Govindananda had a talk just in this last convocation about that same topic. Yeah. What was the affirmation, Mike?
I think he did this prayer that we all do all the time. I remember that part at least, where he says, when you do the prayer, I will reason, I will will, and I will act, you focus on your spiritual eye. And then when you say, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity, you focus on the heart to feel the guidance in your heart coming in. He also had an affirmation, I think, but I don't remember that one.
I thought that was it, wasn't it?
That was it? Possible, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. And then, if I remember correctly, the first part was with the Christ consciousness center. The second part was with the heart chakra, and then you try to combine them together, so you're kind of receiving and transmitting at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of meditation. Oftentimes we do the techniques, and then Guruji says we should sit the same amount in silence as we do technique, at least, right? So, and give him a chance to answer. Like we send a signal out, and then we want to receive.
Enjoy the meal. Don't just walk away from the table. I think that's one of the monks said that, or Guruji may have said that in one of the writings.
I like that. Good comparison. And Guruji goes on in the next paragraph where he says that all thoughts vibrate eternally in the cosmos. And so that is a very profound thought. But first, Priyank.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's both positively and negatively profound. What I mean by that is, if you have a good thought, a loving thought, then it's great to have that one perpetually vibrating in the cosmos and all around you. But the flip side is that if you have a negative or a not so positive thought, then that also stays out there, which will then in some way contribute to the state of the world and the universe, and you know, the yuga that we're in, and the energy, the downward energy or the upward energy. So like the point is, we don't want to contribute or support Maya, because that's what we would be then doing. So we actually have a lot of responsibility, that means. So it's it's quite a deep few words there with some profound implications for your life.
I love the idea that thoughts are not individual but universally rooted. So that means that when I have a thought, you know, how, imagine you're an inventor, you get an idea and you build that machine. That doesn't mean that that truth came to you only, or you invented this truth. That just means it was out there and you just picked up on it and acted on it, really. So maybe that would give some people some humility.
Oh, thanks, Mike. That's really good. I was really struggling to understand those two lines actually about that, what you just revealed about truth being out there. And I remember when I was learning Sanskrit, they said the same thing, essentially saying that Sanskrit is a discovered language. So it's not like someone created it. It's a truth that's, you know, vibrating in the ether, and someone who has realized, discovered the language, and so for example,
amazing,
water,
like science.
Yeah, right. Like water apparently has in Sanskrit has 15 different words for it, but equally, like the comparison, it still has like a different word for water if it's like a dewdrop, if it's splash, if it's the ocean, if it's a waterfall. All of that's water, but each form of that water is different, so the sound associated with it is different, and hence the word would be different. So that's the example I was given.
Amazing. That is so interesting. I know my dad, he was very much interested in math, and his whole life was a search for prime numbers and proof of theorems and stuff like that. So he always explained that to me in that context, that math was also not invented by someone, but it was discovered. And if Sanskrit is also being discovered in the same way, that would kind of make sense to me. And thanks for sharing that, Priyank. I like that thought. The nature of thoughts is that they come to you kind of based on the state of your mind. So if you are in a high state of mind, you will also receive the higher thoughts, the positive thoughts. And if you are in Guruji says it here, any erroneous thought in man is a result of an imperfection. So it doesn't mean we are victim of the thoughts. We attract the thoughts that come in. And if we don't want those thoughts to come in, then we have to work on ourselves. So it's like always on the spiritual path, we have complete self-responsibility for what we do, and everything that happens to us happens for a reason.
I find this a very humbling thought, because incarnations has it taken us to get to where we are. And I feel very, very humbled that we actually have the lessons and have the Kriya Yoga initiation available to us. That, as Guruji says, has come through great karma. But I feel like we're at the first step of this journey, in some sense, that we've got such a long journey that's we're very privileged to be on, of course, but we're at the very beginning of it, and we're in school, at our table, getting lectured by our guru. But it's this sentence. It's very humbling to see yourself in the grand scheme of the cosmos.
Yeah, and Guruji goes on. He says the goal of yoga science is to calm the mind, that without distortion it may hear the infallible counsel of the inner voice. And Shiraz has found a section of the Bhagavad Gita that is very fitting here. So, Chris, do you want to start reading that paragraph out?
Yes, so this is page 641 on the hardback version. And Arjuna asks Lord Krishna for help in how to control or calm the mind, comparing it to the wind. So Lord Krishna provides this insight in how to achieve this. In Master's commentary, he states, O mighty armed devotee, made in the image of spirit, no doubt the mind is restless and difficult to control, but there are two ways to subdue it. First, by meditation and ecstasy, the mind must be taught to regain its natural power of abiding in the soul's tranquil state. And second, at the same time, the mind must be dispassionately disengaged from desires for pleasures of this world and of the hereafter, desires that stimulate the mind to restlessness.
Beautiful. Now we can continue on to my beloved paragraph that I wanted to skip to earlier, where Guruji talks about radio and television and how they have brought us instantaneous sight and sound. He says, to the firesides of millions. And he puts a very profound sentence there. He says, the first faint scientific intimation that man is all pervading spirit. So that fact that we are able to do this, that this is possible at all, and that we can do it with technology, is already a sign for us that we are more than just those bodies who are geographically only located in one place and cannot really travel through space or time.
I remember I was in Alexandra Palace just a few days ago for a yoga festival thing. Yeah. And there's, for those who have been there, it's on a bit of a hill, and there's a huge tower, radio tower, and there's a plaque outside that says that this was where the first high definition television broadcast was ever made. And then I watched the actual broadcast, and it said this is direct television from Alexandra Palace, and as like a news thing. And then we were just reading this as well. While I was reading this, obviously preparing for this, I thought that's so wonderful, the synchronicity.
Yeah, and then instead of Alexandra Palace, this is live television from Guruji. This is what we want. The goal.
And it's a good way for like everyone to like understand these truths, isn't it? Like he's saying that everyone's going to appreciate what man is capable of, essentially. We kind of take it for granted because we've had it for so long, and we like put the understanding of it to just one side, don't we? But for back then, when it was first, like, you know, when you first saw a television or whatever, you know, it's something that was live, it would have been mind-blowing, isn't it? Especially because in terms of what we are and aren't capable of.
Did you guys wonder why having television is already an intimation of our all-pervading spirit? Do you think it is because it is a change? That's what I thought, but it might not be the right thing. But that having technology that does broadcast speech and sight all over the planet, kind of it broadens our horizon. It gives our consciousness the possibility that this is possible, and maybe that way we will discover it in the future, that our consciousness can do it the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of one of Master's talks where he mentions he's in a movie theater and he sees the operator. People are seeing the war movie or whatever it is on the screen, and they're shouting and they're very much caught up in it. And then he sees the beam of light from the operation booth, and he has this inner dialogue with God. and says, I understand that this is just a play on of light, but the others don't. And similarly, I think Master, he tries to draw comparisons with this world and its seeming reality, but again, it's really in its essence a play of light.
Chiaroscuro, I think it was the word that he used.
Really?
Contrast between light and shade.
Chiaroscuro, yeah.
That's
Light
the
and
one.
shade, yeah.
That's the one. No, never heard of that word before then, but obviously it's etched in my memory now. But back to what Mike said about why it was so like not important, but profound to have television and radio transmission, because I think it's also because the known limitations of time and space and how you get from A to B was like completely eradicated, right? Everyone before that, the highest speed they may have seen is probably like a fast train, you know, something along those lines. But you can physically see that moving. Even the fastest train that may have gone like 80 miles per hour back then, you'd still be able to see it. Whereas this, you can't even see it, and it's so fast it can go from one end of the globe to the other in, you know, a second. So it's like a complete step change in anything that anyone's ever conceived of before and even experienced.
You know, when I was younger, watching Willy Wonka really hit hard for me.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, yeah. Because in the scene, one of the scenes where they go into the TV broadcasting site and they're able to shrink the people down to size, and you know, these we talk about the cities, you know, the capabilities of mankind, and that's one of them is shrinkage of the form, or you know, enhancing the form, making it heavy, making it light. You know, we know that these things through the cities are possible, and this is shown in Willy Wonka, the chocolate and the Charlie Factory. Quite insane.
Gosh, how much do you want to just jump in that chocolate fountain pool river? Oh,
swim in this chocolate river, yeah.
Oh.
Life goals.
That's my conception of the astral world right there.
It's a good one. I would stay there for a while. Yeah, that's good. I wonder if Hiranyaloka has any chocolate rivers there. Yeah. The whole concept is interesting, that we are able to broadcast our thoughts to other people, and that right now, I mean, we are recording this and we're in 3 different countries. Chris is in the Southern Hemisphere, but somehow we are recording a podcast episode together. So this is super normal today, and I'm guessing back then it was mind-boggling. So it really changed the way people were thinking, created new vocabulary and everything. The one thing that Guruji still says about the all-pervading spirit is, he says, though the ego in most barbaric ways conspires to enslave him, man is not a body. It's confined to a point in space, but he's essentially an omnipresent soul. So this is basically bringing it home that we are not confined to this body in essence.
It's sounds really it's a hard-hitting thing, isn't it? Though the ego in most barbaric ways conspires to enslave him. Oh wow. Like, you really don't want to be part of this package, do you, that we're in this description? But there's light at the end of the tunnel where it says man is not a body confined to a point in space, but essentially the omnipresent soul. And sticking with the theme of authors, famous authors, so that Chris just mentioned with the Charlie and Chocolate Factory, I think it was Roald Dahl, wasn't it? Was it? And I remember C.S. Lewis a famous quote that says something similar, where she says, "You don't have a soul; you are a soul, and you have a body." So, so we don't. We usually get this the wrong way around, right? We're in this consciousness where we think that we're enslaved. Where like the body, body is enslaved to soul, but we're a soul, and body is like this, as C.S. Lewis says, is this attachment appendage to the soul. It's really nice. And there's another quote by Pierre Chardin, which is similar, which says, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience." Again, similar, quite profound concepts, which really like make you think about what Guruji is saying here in like everyday language and everyday like simple quotes and thoughts.
Yeah, and there's also explained in a more scientific way in the Bhagavad Gita, and Shiraz found a nice section there that we could read out about the bodily kingdom as ruled by the rebel ego king, and it's very profound and quite long. So we just picked out 2 paragraphs that we thought did well. Shiraz, do you want to read the first paragraph?
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes: the ministers of desires, emotions, habits, and undisciplined sense inclinations under Prime Minister ignorance. The doors of the parliamentary House of Lords are closed, and the lordly discriminative tendencies in the upper house of the medulla, cervical, and dorsal centers are rendered powerless. The common sensory powers in the House of Commons, the lower house of the lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal centers, are influenced by Prime Minister ignorance to support the base sense inclinations of King Ego.
Enslaved citizens of the bodily kingdom, thoughts, will, feelings, cells, molecules, atoms, electrons, life sparks, all working in unnatural and inharmonious conditions to appease King Ego and his henchmen, and in consequence, suffering irritation, sickness, and inefficiency. So yes, let's not be like one of the commoners in the House of Commons. We want to be associated with King Soul in the House of Lords. Such a
right.
Guruji has used some politics, probably the most famous in Western politics anyway, the House of Commons and House of Lords. The structure is quite strange.
In England, the most famous in England.
What's more famous?
Do you think people in Germany know about the English parliamentary system?
Where was Magna Carta signed? Huh?
Magna what?
Copied parliamentary system in the world, isn't it?
Mike, I don't believe Guruji mentioned any part of Munich or Berlin in this text.
Yeah, maybe a few pages after. No, I did see. I like that Chris was waving the British flag when we read this out. Some feelings of British patriotism came up, but it's wonderfully explained, explaining how the body is essentially governed, right? And there are different, I don't want to say checks and balances, but there are different centers that govern different parts of our willpower, which is very interesting. Yeah, and I guess you guys are right. The British parliamentary system is pretty famous, so it makes sense. It makes sense to use it. Yeah.
I also like how Guruji underlines Prime Minister ignorance as being, one of the main culprits here, and everyone kind of follows the dictates of Prime Minister ignorance. And Master says, frequently that spiritual ignorance is, one of the real causes of suffering. So I think it's just a very interesting way how he highlights this message once again here.
Yeah, 100%. Prime Minister ignorance. That's a good word. I like that. The next thing that in the text is a quote by I think now we can call him our old friend Charles Robert Richet, because he was mentioned before, and he says something very interesting. He says, very strange, very wonderful, seemingly very improbable phenomena may yet appear, which, when once established, will not astonish us more than we are now astonished at all that science taught us during the last century. And that is true. That is like, he basically describes that things that are new astonish us, but things, once we know them, they don't astonish us much anymore. But Guruji, he has a point that he wants to make here, and he says that it is assumed here that things excite us because they don't excite us anymore because now they are understood. Before they weren't, and Guruji wants to really push the notion that they are not understood; they're just familiar. And then he goes to very basic concepts like gravity, like life itself, like how mercury reacts in heat and in cold. And he says that we know that those things happen, but we don't understand why. And that is important to him. And I'm guessing we're in the beginning of the Dwapara Yuga, so science is still in its infancy, and we don't understand most of these things right now.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love the notion and the wording here. Section where it says it's not that if they do not surprise us, it's not because they are understood, but it's because they are familiar, which is really, really profound, because there's this whole concept right now that where we should look at everything with the same innocence and awe as a child looks at it, and how fascinated they are with everything. And it's just a great concept because we just take everything nowadays. We just take everything for granted, don't we? Everything from like God's grace to the apple that we've got on our tables that you got from the supermarket. We just disconnected from the whole process of life that has been that was involved in creating that apple. So I think it's really important because if we do connect to all things that are familiar and go beyond just we're used to it, because then we can connect to everything that is simple but it's like actually magical if you think about it, as Guruji describes those 4 examples, especially acorn which becomes an oak, right? It will take us many decades to see that in practice. But we have to try, isn't it? Because how else would we enhance our love, peace and joy without appreciating these kind of things?
Yeah, and it is true. Like, it is like whenever we take a concept that is kind of given and we dig deeper, we figure out that we actually have no idea why it's happening. Like, gravity is a good one. That there's this whole concept of quantum gravity where people have been trying to find or prove the existence of gravitrons, which are like quantums that cause gravity. And so that we haven't come to a conclusion yet in this, so we're still looking, and we will find out. Maybe one day we will be able to manipulate gravity, but right now we just know it's there. We don't know why it's there, really.
But going back to the more simple stuff that we would take for granted, for example, peace and joy, we may like experience some or a lot of those things, but obviously the source of those things is God, right? And those are really divine experiences that we're having. But they may be familiar. Majority of us, thankfully, aren't living in a war-torn country. We're not, the majority of us here at least aren't, suffering terrible poverty or famine or things like that. So we're blessed to have peace and be able to so easily disconnect from everything here and meditate, for example. But that's such a blessing. We have so much grace that we're just familiar, we're used to, that we're actually most of the time quite unappreciative of the fact that we have it. So yeah, and we don't, but for that reason we don't think to any deeper. We don't try and understand like how blessed we are and how much God has given us.
100%. Hashtag grateful, because that's what we should be. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that gratefulness is something that is powerful because it changes our attitude. It doesn't say we should take all of this for granted, but we should be grateful every single day for those wonderful lives that we're living, continue to live. And we have one more paragraph to go. But first, Shiraz, do you want to ask something?
Oh, yes. I was just thinking, Master says frequently, where would we be if the Lord was too busy to beat in our hearts and to keep, and where would our engagements be? So just, reiterating the message of being very grateful that, we are where we are and we are able to live our lives how we are as well. And how everything that we do is like a miracle around us. I'm not aware of actively beating my heart. There's some process there behind it. So there's so much to be thankful for.
Yeah, this is very well said, and I much feel that as well. But this Charles Richet, this is the second mention of him in the autobiography. I think he mentioned Richet and some of his similar kind of philosophies a few chapters ago. So Guruji must be a big fan of his work.
100%. Guruji I think he would surprise us if he was here today, because I think he would read books of all the contemporary scientists and philosophers and be interested in them and try to weed through them for truth in their writings, and as he did back then. And we know if you get cited in the Autobiography of a Yogi, I would call it a high praise.
Write it on your CV. But we don't need to ponder on what he read and what books he read, because if you go to Mount Washington, you can go to his room, look to the right, you'll see a bookshelf full of some fascinating books. And if you can't go there, then go to the Convocation app and take a virtual pilgrimage tour like I did. And then you can do like a street view of the center of the Mount Washington and go to his room, look right, and you can see the books that are there. I did a screenshot once, and some interesting books, shall we say.
Yeah. And he often mentioned to read books of autobiographies of inspiring people, not expiring. Yes.
Interesting you should say that, actually, because in India, if someone passed away, it's very common to say he's expired. He's expired. In English, that's like really rude, right? It's like you wouldn't say that. It's like disrespectful, but technically correct.
Wonderful. If you take reincarnation into consideration, then it becomes less cruel. Yeah. So then Guruji goes on, and he says that science of today is a light matter, and I would say that is a profound sentence. So I guess what he means by that is that science I think this sentence still stands true today, that we have so many things that we can be thankful for because science found it out for us, but we are nowhere near having figured out how this cosmos works, and we are at the beginning of something, and there is so much more to come. So I guess in that sense there is as a scientist today, there's still much work to be done. He says, those amazing truths that our descendants will discover are even now all around us, staring us in the eyes, so to speak, yet we do not see them. So I'm guessing that was always true, that like certain phenomena were difficult to explain even 200-300 years ago, before people found out about the mechanisms behind them, and they were still there. People still saw them, but they didn't know why they were that way. And it's still true today with many things. And then Guruji makes a comment on this, but before that, Priyank.
Yeah, I like this quote here by Anais Nin, which says, which you may have heard, which says, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are," which is kind of true, isn't it? We see it in our lens of what we've experienced and perceived and what our understanding is, and it's exactly what Guruji is saying here, isn't it? We don't see properly.
Yeah, and Guruji says exactly something along those same lines. He says it's not like we don't see those things that stares in the eye, but we don't want to see them because they don't fit in our framework of knowledge, as he said, at the framework of accepted knowledge. So there's a part of our mind that kind of draws a border and says, I don't understand this, therefore it does not exist. And that keeps us sane, I guess. That keeps us that keeps our consciousness, that keeps us in a good space. I think otherwise we would maybe would have no choice but to keep thinking about those things that we don't understand, and it would maybe draw us in some kind of endless spiral. So our mind, I would call it a safety mechanism, just turns that off and just doesn't exist. Don't think about it. Guruji says,
sorry, yeah, Mike, you're right. It is a little bit of a survival mechanism as well, actually, isn't it? Because like you hear countless stories of like geniuses and philosophers essentially going insane because they're like probing so deep into the psyche and the philosophy that they just can't stay sane in terms of their connection with life. So it must be because when you do it in an uncontrolled way, just through your own kind of like method, rather than how Guruji is teaching us, because essentially we're probing the same things, right? But we're doing it as it's prescribed, by the sages and the saints for thousands of years. So like we're protected, and we don't even like getting Kriya, for example. You can't just apply and get it. They interview you and see if you've been living the teachings, if you've been doing the preliminary practices, and if you're essentially ready. And similarly with Kriya 2 and Kriya 3, it doesn't just come, otherwise you also may go insane. And Guruji uses that example of the 1,000,000-watt bulb lamp in your body being only capable of housing a 5-watt lamp.
Yeah, like you said, Priyank, there's some it's like a safety mechanism, and it's uncomfortable expanding our knowledge. We don't like it when it happens. And Guruji says, we are indignant that anyone should dare to experiment further. As in, So we know everything we need to know, no need for any further knowledge. That's kind of the default how our mind works.
Yeah. And this in many ways, this is why Einstein was so unique, because, like, for example, he used to draw very simple diagrams of his theories, like pictures that are not in the other scientists couldn't even imagine simplifying to that level of simplicity. Like he drew like space-time, like curve, and like drew a ball curving it, for example. And so he was seeing it with like a fresh pair of eyes, like, so he could see, he could be innovative and like help use that methodology of like a childlike innocence and way of looking at things to like really go deeper and put some substance to his theories and really develop them, because he said he was terrible at maths, for example. He was not a mathematician. So like he conceived, for example, he conceived his theory of general relativity, but it took him 2 or 3 decades to put the maths together to make it actually print publishable on in the scientific journals. Otherwise we wouldn't have
just 3 letters at the end, right?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And we found something that I say we, I mean Shiraz. He found he
the royal we.
Yeah,
the
royal
exactly.
we. That's right. Because we're the House of Commons.
Because we're in the House of Lords.
Yeah,
House of Lords.
Not the House of Commons. So because something like this happened a few chapters earlier to Jagdish Chandra Bose, who was experimenting with what was this machine called? I forgot now. But he was like taking long-term images of plants growing, and then he increased the speed, and then he showed how when he used metal or when he used different substances on them, they would change. Was it Crescograph?
Crescograph, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Crescograph. Yeah,
nice one.
Yeah. And that was also not very well received in the beginning by the scientific community, because he went into a different direction as the consensus. So let's read that section again to refresh our memory. Shiraz, do you want to start?
Yeah, of course. So a universal reaction seemed to bring metal, plant, and animal under a common law. They all exhibited essentially the same phenomena of fatigue and depression, with possibilities of recovery and of exaltation, as well as the permanent unresponsiveness associated with death. Filled with awe at this stupendous generalization, it was with great hope that I announced my results before the Royal Society, results demonstrated by experiments.
But the physiologists present advised me to confine myself to investigations in physics, in which my success had been assured, rather than to encroach on their preserves. I had unwittingly strayed into the domain of an unfamiliar caste system and had offended its etiquette.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what the etiquette would have been. Maybe he would have had to go study with some of those famous scientists and write a paper together with them or something like that.
Do you know that we're, if you go to the House of Lords and House of Commons, the Parliament building, the 4 of us aren't allowed to go anywhere near inside the chamber of the House of Lords because we're commoners. We're allowed to go into the House of Commons and look around, sit in the, seat, whatever, but not, that's the etiquette and the caste system that's present in the Parliament.
Yeah. Then you wonder why people want to get rid of the House of Lords.
It is insane. It is insane.
So I think we did justice to this section of the book. Shiraz, do you want to tell us what the next section will bring us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next section will be about the missing lamp. There's a missing kerosene lamp, and Sri Yukteswar says to Mukunda, to Paramhansa Yogananda, who's seeking his help after seeing the powers that he demonstrated with the cauliflower robbery. Sri Yukteswar says, "I'm not even a satisfactory Sherlock Holmes, not being able to resolve this issue himself." Then we go on later to the revealed secret. So they are organizing a procession, and it's scorching heat. And no sooner had they left the hermitage, the sky became filled with clouds as though by magic. So rains descended, and the procession was able to carry on in relative comfort. And then finally, it goes with God feels for us. So Sri Yukteswar says, "The Lord responds to all and works for all. Just as he sent rain at my plea, so he fulfills any sincere desire of the devotee."
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Shiraz. And thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure to record this episode
Thank you
with
so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to all the listeners, everyone who watches it on YouTube. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.